If you have two shoes, please sell one and buy a sword. If you have two trousers, please sell one and buy a sword. Because now it is time for revolution. And this revolution is not on the streets. This revolution is not about burning cars. This revolution is not on social media alone. This revolution is in the mind. It's essentially about building our own cars and making our own money in selling them. Peace and power, revolutionary greetings to all of you African people from wherever you find yourself. We say peace and love and freedom and decolonization. This is King Kabbalah from the African Continental Unity Party and the Free-Minded Pan-African Academy. I'm happy to have you again watching us from wherever you find yourself around the globe on our weekly conversation where we talk about matters concerning African liberation and emancipation. There is no other topic that is more important today than this single topic of African emancipation, actually African liberation and emancipation. Because as long as we are not yet liberated, we cannot talk about development, we cannot talk about modernization, we cannot talk about any other topics any other topic that sounds fancy, from the elite cycle. We, as the majority of African people, the most important thing for us is the liberation, and we're gonna have to achieve this liberation by all means necessary through the revolutionary agenda which the African Continental Unity Party is pushing for some times now. Today I actually just wanted us to discuss about the political or the nature of political power in Africa. So please don't forget to leave your comment below according to your own understanding of the topic and analysis that we are presenting for you to you. Our interpretation of the topic that we are putting forth. So please leave your comment below. And if you're willing to get more in touch with us, you know what to do. Our website is in the description. So before we start, kindly share the video, like it to get more, to help us get more people subscribing to our channel and obviously getting more views, which will help us. It is the custom on YouTube. Now, talking about the nature of political power in Africa. The reason why we want to talk about this topic is because at this moment, every African person is aware that the situation on the continent is very bad. The situation is not promising. When we look at Africa, with all the resources of Africa, the African people are languishing in poverty and in all conditions of precarity. And many of our people find that it is necessary to cross the Mediterranean water in order to join Spain, Italy, all those countries which seem to be the paradise for the common African man. So the situation is very difficult in Africa. Everyone, actually at the moment, everyone understands that. So the problem is the way we go about addressing or interpreting the difficulty that we know or that we are experiencing in Africa. That's where the problem is, because each interpretation paves a way to a kind of solution that we will have to come up with in order to solve the crisis that we are facing in Africa. So that's where we want to talk about. And in most cases today, commonly it is now being known that the major problem in Africa, the major challenge in Africa is a bad leadership, a corrupt leadership. And we simply believe that by changing the leadership, we will automatically, or by putting in place a correct leadership, we will automatically get rid of all the difficulties that we are facing in Africa today, and we will put Africa on that track of development and progress. We also believe the same thing. However, we look at the crisis from its a rudiment premise, if I should use the word. I mean, we look at it from its fundamental, from its core, actually. That's where we look at the crisis, and we're trying to solve it from its, obviously, its core or its roots. Because if we try to deal with symptoms, the problem is still going to be there. Can you imagine you going, for example, to a mechanic with your car that the engine light is on, and you take it to the mechanic, and the mechanic opens your car and then cut the light that is on, and then it puts the engine off eventually by cutting the lights or the wires that go to the lights, and it gives you back the car. Eventually you will know that the problem is not solved, because he dealt with the symptom, but it did not go to the root cause of the problem. It's the same thing with us in Africa today. We are dealing more with symptoms, but we don't want to question the fundamental of the crisis that we are facing in Africa today. The crisis that did not start with your current president, the crisis that did not start with the previous president, the crisis that started actually at the Berlin Conference, and even before the Berlin Conference, 1884, 1885, the crisis or the blueprint of the crisis was already established, so that we are going through the same cycle today of the same crisis. So that is what we need to address, and that is the proper way to solve our problem as African people. Now, what do we want to make, or what do we want to emphasize here, to be more precise? You see, in Africa, we are now struggling or fighting for, as I said, for the change of bad leaders. So in doing that, we go for elections every 5 years. We elect those leaders we believe that will bring about the change we are hoping, will create jobs, will build infrastructures, will create economy, will bring investors on the continent, so that we can see Africa taking off. And when these leaders come into power, they are also faced with their own realities, which they didn't know when they were out of power. And then we start having all these struggle or all these problems that we see every time. And before we realize it, the 5 years is already over, and we are now approaching for another elections, whereby we need now to find other people who will replace those we have elected. And the cycle goes on just like that. It has been like that for the past 60 years that we are talking about African independence. Now, isn't this very curious to you that we have been electing people in, people out, doing all this change of faces, hoping to get the people who at least are not corrupt as the ones that we want to get rid of in the power? Have you not been really curious about the situation? When are we finally going to get the leaders who are not corrupt? Because there's been now more than half a century that we have been doing the same thing every time, hoping to get leaders who are not corrupt, and it just looks like it's difficult to get those leaders. And many people now eventually know that politics is corrupt. When you talk about politics, especially in Africa, politics is corrupt. So what is the outcome of this change of leaders after every 5 years or 7 years, depending on your electoral cycle? This is what I'm saying, that we are dealing with symptoms, but we don't want to question the cause of the problem, because if we want to question the root cause of the problem, we will then begin to think that a changing a president is not necessarily changing the regime, right? You can change the president, but the regime is still there. It will be able to produce exactly the same result that you didn't want, the same result that you dislike. Secondly, changing regime, even if you go about changing the regime, it means changing all the cabinets, all the ministers, all the people who are part of the governing body. Even if you go about changing these people, it doesn't mean that you have changed the system. You see, you can also proceed about changing the regime. We saw recently, in the recent years in Africa, a lot of protests undertaken by young people to overthrow some regimes, starting from Arabic countries in Africa. I think somewhere around 2008, 2010, 2011, it ended with Muammar Gaddafi being overthrown by the Western powers. But we saw that movement, which was called Arab Spring or Revolution, which was aiming about removing the regimes, dictatorial regimes or autocratic regimes as they were called. But as we look at the situation today, it's pretty much the same. Sometimes the conditions of life have even worsened for those people who struggled on streets during that time to get rid of the leaders or of the regimes. So we need to understand that when you get rid of your president, it doesn't mean that you have gotten rid of the regime. And secondly, when you get rid of the regime, it doesn't mean that you have gotten rid of the system. You see, there's a system also that englobes every entities operating within the system. We need to understand that as well. So the system is also very important. You can change the president, you can change the heads of state, you can change all these things, but as long as the system remains the same, you are likely going to face the same result. You have to look at it in this way. When you see the flowing water or the river, anything that you throw in the river will be taken by the current of water, or by the motion of water in the direction of the water that is flowing from point A to point B. That is a system. We have a system that is in motion, and everything or everybody you throw in the system is taken already by the inertia of the system, and he will be likely going to produce the same results that we dislike. A pure person that you can think of, he can be a right person, right mindset, everything correct about him, but once you drop him in the system as we have it today, he will be taken by the inertia of the system. He will have to go along the system, and the results that we dislike will be repeating itself. That's a reality. You cannot take one drop of blood, for example, right? You put in a jar of water, clean water, and expecting the jar of water to turn into blood. No, it's still gonna be water, even though you have dropped a drop of blood there. So you're gonna need more blood. So literally, what I'm trying to say is that you're gonna have to need a different system so that the different regime that we put in place can produce different results, and ultimately so that different heads of states that we are putting in place can produce also different results. Lastly, very important, you can even change the system as well, right? You can change everything. You have changed the heads of states, you have changed the regime, you have changed the system, but the last thing is the mindset. Changing the system does not mean you have changed the mindset of the people. You see, that's also another area where we have to look at, because even a better system that you can think of, if it's put in the hands of a person whose mind is corrupt, the person whose mind is inclined to do bad things, to corruption, to killing, to destroying the nature and the environment, that system will make that person even worse. It's the same as technology. Technology can be used for a lot of things, a lot of productive things that can enhance the life of human beings. But if you take this technology, no matter how good it is, and you put it in the hands of a capitalist mindset, that technology is going to produce the results that you did not expect of it. That person will use that technology to do bad things in the society. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is the good system does not really improve or change the person whose mindset is obviously set to destroy lives of other people or to create chaos. So ultimately, the area where we need to begin with when we try to tackle this situation of African political power and its context is by starting with the mindset of people. You see, all the scholars of the past, all the thinkers, all the philosophers, all the prophets, no matter who you consult and no matter how you think they are different, you will see that they have agreed on one fundamental things about human life, and that is, as a man thinks, so is he. It means the reality of every person is not far from the mindset of that person, right? Now, we can bring this statement to another level to say that as people think collectively, right, so is their society. So if we have a society where people have corrupt mindset, we definitely have to expect that we have a society that is corrupted. And even if we are trying to change A, B, C, D person in that particular society, we are still likely going to face the same result that we dislike, right? So this is the problem. So the starting point is the mindset of the people. We need to begin with changing the mindset of the people. And Frederick Douglass said that it is easy to raise strong children than to change a broken man, right? Of course, and that is true. So this means the education of the young ones is the most important for the future that we expect to see in Africa. And it is said that education is the preparation of the future generations. So if we believe that we have a future as African people, we believe in our own continuation to exist as a people, then we have to educate the people who will take over from us. And those are the young children. And we need to question the content of the education. And at this moment, I think we need the education that will change the mindset of an African so that he or she can look at themselves as truly people capable of bringing forth something worthy to talk about, something really meaningful to contribute to, firstly, their own lives as a society, and eventually to the entire human family life and existence, to improve our conditions in the world. So education is the first point where we need to change this reality of African people. Education is the first key that we have in addressing the conditions, the current condition of Africa that we want to get rid of, the condition that we want to get rid of. So it's not just about replacing the leaders with those one who have been educated in France, who have been educated in England, who have been educated, I don't know, in China, right? With the mindset obviously coded to look at the society from a Chinese, from American, from France perspective, not from an African perspective. And we'll bring these leaders in Africa, hoping that they will be able to create a difference. And, we get surprised that they are actually the continuation of the same system. So we need to now begin to focus on the education of the young ones if we hope to see Africa in a better condition, as we expect to see Africa getting better and better as we are moving forward. I hope this was useful to you. And if you like it, please subscribe, share, and like the video. If you have 2 shoes, please sell one and buy a sword. If you have 2 trousers, please sell one and buy a sword, because now it is time for revolution. And this revolution is not on streets. This revolution is in the mind. Peace and love, freedom and decolonization. See you again.